Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum dear students. In our last class we were talking about broadcast and web news writing, and we completed two, like radio and TV news writing, and web news writing was left. Let's very briefly talk about what we did actually in the last class. We compared newspaper or paper news writing and this TV and radio news writing. And fundamentally, of course, news is news, whether it appears in newspapers or it appears on TV or radio, or of course through web or internet. The fundamental concept, the fundamental definition of news, of course, remains the same. News is something, of course, which is new, which people want to read and talk about, and which, of course, like reporters and journalists, they want to, of course, gather information about and like to, of course, convey through different, media. Of course, the major difference is that newspaper thing is total reading, There are writers, news writers, they are writing news for you, and then that, news is, of course, presented through newspapers, and it reaches, in your hands in the form of papers, and of course, you read and you, of course, understand. Whereas in TV and radio, things are totally different. Like if you take the example of radio, like medium, of course, there it's total auditory thing, Newscasters, they, of course, read news for you, and you sitting on the other side of it, you listen to it and you understand. In newspapers, you can reread, you can repeat, you can revise, you can clear your concepts if any complicated idea or issue is under discussion. Whereas on radio, you do not have this facility, but newscasters, on radio, of course, they try to, use such language, such vivid and image, making words and expressions, to create exactly the same news scene, like, which as if, like, you were very much present on the spot, and, like, yourself with your eyes, like, watching the whole scene. In TV, of course, it's a mix of audio and visual. Over there you have, of course, auditory pleasures also, and then visual pleasures as well. On TV, of course, again, there will be newscasters who are going to read news for you, okay, so you are going to listen. You can also watch. Of course, you're watching the newscaster, you are checking the body language, you are checking the, the physical, expressions as well, like the body language thing and the facial, expressions and all. At the same time, TV news writing actually gives you one more facility that you can, important points of the news, if, the news reporter, they feel like, discussing with you some very, very important lines of the news, of course, they can print on your screen those lines, and you can read them the way you read in newspapers. At the same time, you can listen to some audio clips also. I mean, there can be someone's interview or someone reporting for you, and the image or the picture of that reporter you can see on the TV, plus his voice. Through his voice, you can see, if possible, live news reporting. Plus, with the help of cameras, these TVs, they can take you to the news spots, and you can see with your own eyes things happening. So these are, of course, major differences. Dear students, the way, like, we use spellings, the way we use punctuations, exactly the same way. For TV and radio, of course, we do not use spellings, we use pronunciations, and of course, they are phonetic spellings. And at the same time, we do not use punctuation, of course. What we use, of course, we use stress and intonation to create the same kind of actually effects. Now, let's move towards what is, web news writing. Look here, if I tell you, like, the similarities and the differences, between this newspaper, radio, this TV and web. Look, web lies somewhere in between newspaper, radio and TV news writing. How? Look, when you, like, go on to some website, for example, some newspaper's website, or TV's, some website, news channel's website, what happens actually, you find all the reports written the way they appear in newspapers. At the same time, those news reports, they are, you can say, spotted with the help of audio clips or video clips. So, audio and visual. Audio makes it similar with or equal to the radio newscasting thing. The video clips, take it towards the TV, and it's in readable form. The news in readable form, of course, takes it closer to the newspaper. So this is how are the similarities and the differences. Now, again, web news writing is, of course, the same way. I mean, the way fundamentally we write news. News is what news has got its headline, has got its sub-headlines, strap lines, you can say opening paragraph or the lead. Then you have, sportive details. Inside you have somewhere nut graph, a paragraph, which tells you why so-and-so news is important. And then of course, some wind-ups or some closings. Now, exactly the same way news, appears on the web. Of course, it's different would be on the web, we are confined only to the headline. Usually, sub-headlines and strap lines are not written actually on the web. Just one main headline. And as far as the structure of the news is concerned, for example, lead and the sportive details and the nut graph and the closing, what actually happens, once we talked about how to write an abstract, okay, or how to write summaries or précis. Now, the whole news actually is under the headline. The whole news is summarized and presented. So you do not find, the whole actually news report divided into paragraphs all lying in front of you. Rather, you find one abstract, a paragraph which gives you the abstract of the whole story. So what you find on front of you on your screen is one headline. Under the headline, you find abstract story of that very news. Abstract is basically, you can say, the bird eye view of the whole story. Or you can say this is, just a précis, all WH answered in 1-2 sentences only. And then in newspapers, the way you have jump lines, right? Here we of course do not have jump lines. The, what you call, the headlines act as jump lines. What does it mean? Of course, when you bring your cursor onto the headline, that headline acts as a navigator. If you click that headline, then you can move towards the whole story actually. Over there again, you would find that exactly the same newspaper structure. I mean, the story structure, the way it appears in newspapers, you find exactly the same way. Once again, you find headline there. Once again, you find the lead and the sportive details, the nut graph, and of course the closing thing. Plus, news report is multiplied by, the coverage I'm talking about. Of course, every medium has its own limitation, like radio has its limitation, time is the, price over there. TV has its own limitation, Newspaper, of course, we of course know that details, can be printed to any length actually in newspapers. Exactly the same way this web news writing, here news can be covered to some possible, I would say, extent. That possible extent, of course, is larger than radio and, of course, TV. So you find, you can say, either a step parallel with the newspaper or at times a step ahead of even newspapers in terms of the coverage of the report. So how, then these reports are, what you say, multiplied in terms of its coverage, of course, by, with the help of some pictures and their captions, and some audio clips you find, video clips you find, but of course there will be, little, I would say, hassling, point, and that hassling point is like in newspapers, what happens that if there are some, let's say, some images, for example, of course you find those images right next to the news. On radio, of course, you don't have any images. TV, for example, you have images, you have, videos, and of course, they very nicely punctuate their report with these images and, these video clips, actually. But on, web, actually, all these things are present, but you have to, like these videos, you have to download them. It depends on the speed of, like, the downloading speed, actually. At times, like, things get stuck up, and this is how, like, you get frustrated. But if you have a good, like, connection, for example, then everything's are downloaded the way, like, I mean, it's then goes, no hassle stuff and all. So this is how, news is reported through web thing. As far as the news reporter's role is concerned, please keep in mind that role is same in every medium. News writers or news reporters' role in TV, radio, and newspaper and web is exactly the same. But of course, exposure to different, I would say, usable equipments. What usable equipments? Equipments, every, like, medium gives you or allows you or permits you to use. For example, TV, you will be using, for example, camcorders, you'll be using recorders. Radios, you can use, of course, recorders only. You can voice record and, like, you can, of course, punctuate your report with that, recorded voice of someone's, the one who you interviewed or what. Newspapers, you can only have photographer with you who's, like, taking photos, and that's it. You cannot add, voice with, or you cannot add video with. So every medium has its own, limitations as far as the use of equipment is concerned. Otherwise, the role of the news reporter, of course, is the same. He has a strong nose. He has got, like, strong ears, strong eyes, and he's the one, who can smell, who can hear, and who can taste, and of course, who can find out news from where, from such sources or from such places where a common person perhaps would overlook or would never even expect of, like, having any information. So that stuff is very much there. Another, like, some small differences I would like to discuss with you, like the way we call front page, newspaper, we say front page. In web, like, news, we call it, home page, for example. And in news, the way newspapers, reports are printed with bylines. Byline means the name of the reporter. Also, you find all the web news reporting is, byline. The name of the reporter is always, like, printed. And then comes what, as I told you before, on web you don't have subheadlines, no strap lines. And as far as the jump line is concerned in newspapers, here you don't have jump line, you have navigators. Navigators can be either the headline itself is a navigator, sometimes the abstraction which is given, that itself becomes a navigator, or at times, there are certain icons given down the abstract. You can click those icons and, you can go to the details. So this is how, like, these, web news, actually, they are presented onto, the website. Let's move ahead now towards our next, some more points. As far as writing of the news is concerned, or the characteristics of the web news is concerned, it's the same ABC. I mean, web news also has to be accurate as far as the facts and figures concerned. It has to be brief. Brief not because of this that, you have some space limitation, no, but of course, you have your reader. I mean, you write, of course, for your reader. You know that, how much time a reader can spend. I mean, I'm talking about the average time can spend on one particular story. So keeping that, like, your readers, you can say attention span, for example, that actually pulls us, towards brevity of our, text or our report. Of course, clarity, C for clarity, that has to be very much there. Writing has to be very much clear, so that, no ambiguity, no confusion, no conflict, no any clash, like, or no any dichotomy, for example, could, sneak into your, this report writing. Next comes, like, sentences and paragraphs. Rules are the same. Sentences are always kept short, and paragraphing also is short, so that, people could point by point read out the details. And the structure, as I already explained you, a typical news inverted pyramid structure is followed on the web. And another interesting thing is, like newspapers, this is a major difference actually. Newspapers, of course, if they come today, for example, the next coverage of whatever is happening, let's say you get a newspaper at 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, whatever happens now, even before 8, very early morning, let's say Fajr time, for example, and at 8, and then onwards in the hours, whatever is happening, of course, newspapers are going to report all these stuff, for example, after 12 or 13 or 14 hours. The next 8 o'clock, you will get, to know the remaining, coverage. Sometimes, of course, there are eveningers, for example, afternoon newspapers, evening newspapers, you can, of course, find out and read details. But here on the web, the advantage is, roughly speaking, it's as far as the main story of that web is concerned, that, of course, changes after every 1 hour. Other, smaller stories, every 30 minutes you find their places are, shuffled up. If they were, let's say, in the upper inches of the screen, after 30 minutes, you find, they are, slided down into the middle inches of the screen, and then, of course, in the bottom. And after, let's say 2 hours, you find the whole scene on the web is totally changed. So it means the news pieces are uploaded, roughly speaking, every 60 minutes. Especially the main story, every 60 minutes, you find a new one. But if it is something, you can say, such an issue, which, of course, needs, longer attention spans of the people, for example, then, of course, that story remains there. At times, the whole day it remains there. But, of course, such events or such happenings are, of course, rare. Let's now talk about some proofreading thing. Now, as far as this web proofreading is concerned, web proofreading is exactly the way we proofread our newspapers. But I have collected some points for you, and these points strictly focus. Please don't be misguided. The proofreading points I'm going to discuss with you, they do not focus, you can say this web actually only and only focus TV and radio, news reporting. Let's take a look. It's important actually. On your screen, I have given you two types of proofreading, which we call as later order concerns. Of course, your primary order concerns are facts and figures, the accuracy of your news, the clarity of your news, for example, the coherence and all that stuff of the news. Later order concerns are smaller bits and pieces, which are more impressional actually. I mean to say that if you let them go, the whole impression, will be lost. Of course, it will be negative, feedback, you will get from people. The credibility, of course, will be at stake. These are small points, but the facts are pretty big actually. So you need to have a very close watch of all these points. Again, students, I'm telling you, these proofreading points are only focusing the TV and the radio news writing, okay? Let's take a look. First of all, contents. As far as the content is concerned, you're going to check WH information. The way you check newspaper or web WH, ask yourself that all the news, the report which is written for the radio or for the TV, also you're going to check WH, who, what, when, where, why and how. All these WH are answered. Of course, if they are answered, your report, of course, will be full in the real sense of the word. And then comes, use good source and enough sources of information. Of course, this is reporter's job actually to dig out information, well out, bucket full of information, for the readers. So check all possible sources from where, you can collect information, and do check the authenticity of those, credibility of those sources also. This is very important. Once, like, it's done, then you have to then, check whether I have quoted those facts and figures correctly, I have named people correctly, and all that. Otherwise, of course, there'll be a problem. I mean, if you misquote or you mispronounce anybody's name, problem, of course, will be. The third point, organize information carefully the way it would be read. Of course, I cannot say like TV and radio news should also be organized, in inverted pyramid style. But what I'm saying, radio and TV also, most important point first comes, then second most, second, third most, third, and then like, remaining points, they flow downstairs actually. So exactly the same way you organize, your report so that newscaster could, when speaks, for example, the early lines, they are also, attention seek lines actually. Next point is, check the facts, as I told you before. Fifth one is consider your listeners and viewers. Like as I was telling you before, like newspaper gives this facility that, people can read and reread, okay, they can understand. But here on TV and radio, first of all, you have to keep your rate. When you speak, a newscaster is speaking, news reporter has to advise the newscaster that, when you speak the news, when you read the news, read with the rhythm, number one, read with a controlled pace, controlled rate, so that, the listener could easily understand, do not give torrent, actually, of words. I mean, you can say the bullet speed, like, word falling onto the reader's ears, that he would be confused. So, speak with the rhythm, speak with a controlled flow, controlled pace. Rate should be, frankly speaking, if I give you a rough idea, that is, 65 words in 30 seconds. Now, in 30 seconds, speak 65 words. Now, this is one possible, I'm saying. This is, of course, not that, hard and fast rule, but this is one possible, understanding of the pace or the speed, like, you can go with. Next point is, if needed, use sufficient detail and description. Well, of course, yes. Let's now talk about the proofreading points concerning mechanics. Now, this is important. Number one, check sentences for completeness and sense. Number two, check for consistent verb tense. Number three, check for consistent point of view. Number four, check for subject-verb agreement. Number five, check for proper use of pronouns. Number six, check for phonetic spellings. Dear students, this is very important when, like, news, of course, most of the time, like, news is live. You don't have any chance to correct yourself. Therefore, measures should be taken to phonetically spell out words if there are any foreign names, foreign words, for example. Therefore, it's always advised that any foreign word or any difficult word or any word, like, which that newscaster or that, news reader, for example, feels it difficult to pronounce, should, bracket out with the phonetic, spelling, so that, that could be read correctly. Next point, check for end marks and other, punctuation. Check for uppercasing. As I told you before, news reports for TV and radio, they are written in all uppercase words, not mixed word, somewhere first like, case upper, and then remaining, alphabet lower. Not this way. All are uppercase, so that, it could be read easily by he or she. And the last point is check legibility. Again, the size of the font is important, so that, they do not find any difficulty in, reading that stuff all. Dear students, this is all about this TV, radio, which actually I call broadcast, and web news writing. I hope you understood all that stuff. Of course, you will be reading your handouts, which we have very carefully, designed out and planned for you. Any, confusion or any, misunderstanding, of course, can be, cleared, of course, through reading those handouts, which are, of course, very much important, doing that. Now, let's move towards our new topic of the day. there is actually, these are three small different things, and they are what? Number one, how to write press release. Number two, how to write reviews, actually. And number three, how to write obituary. Now, these are 3 points, we'll be discussing just briefly, so that, these 3 genres could also, be covered, in this course, which are, of course, important. Let's start from, first of all, press release. Look, press release, well, of course, this is reporter's job, actually, to go and get news from every nook and corner of the city and the country and present, to the readers. But sometimes, of course, we do not wait for the reporters, actually. What we do is, actually, there are certain cases when reporters actually don't know, that some stuff is, going on somewhere, or will be, let's say, held, for example, somewhere. So that piece of information, if you want to convey yourself, then, of course, you can write yourself a small piece of news, and that news, of course, you can send to the newspaper. Over there, of course, it will be viewed and reviewed and analyzed and checked whether it's newsworthy or not, whether it can be given any space or not. So that stuff, this is how, the press release, So press release is something which is not written by reporters, actually, which is written by me, by you, by anybody, If there is any happening, let's say you are, studying in some university, so any official, unofficial student body happenings, for example, and you want some news coverage, you want to inform lots of people, for example, about that happening, so you can write a press release, send it to the newspaper, and this is how people, of course, can be informed about. Or if, the same way, some from government departments, for example, if there is anything, there is going to happen anything, or there has happened, for example, or any announcement, for example, anything, any newsworthy thing, any piece of news which you want to tell, your country fellows, for example, so you can yourself write out on a piece of paper, okay, and send to the newspaper. It will be, of course, printed. Now, what is the structure of a press release? How press release is written, actually? Well, there are 4 important items, you can say, or 4 important, let's say, paragraphs, very practically speaking, which you are going to, bury your information in. Of course, first of all, please keep in mind, you can be a very good writer. As a common man, you can be a very good writer, but you are not a reporter, actually. Reporting itself is a genre, actually. Itself is an art and craft. It's a skill, of course. People have learned it, through training, through, their experience, through, of course, their education. You may be like, fiction writer, for example, or even you may be a non-fiction writer, but you have your own genre, which you follow. But when you are reporting something yourself, maybe voluntarily, okay, or maybe, somebody has authorized you to do it, then, of course, you will have to follow the structure pattern of the news reporter so that, that news could be, conveyed. Of course, you will not be writing this news the way you write essays, for example, or the way you write novels, for example, or the way you write, your personal diaries, for example. No. Press release should also go the way, every day you read, news reports in newspapers. Of course, there are headlines, there are opening paragraphs, there are some details, there are some closings, exactly the same way you'll be writing. So what are those 4 items which I mentioned that press release goes in? First of all, you are going to make out one headline of that story which you have, which you want to tell the newspaper. So headline will be number 1. There is no need to write subheadlines. There is no need to write any strapline, just the headline. Now, what is headline? In your case, headline will be, you can say, the title, actually, of that news, the subject of that news, or you can say the caption of that news. If you ask me the size of that headline, well, that headline should not be more than 75 characters, I'm not saying 75 words. Please don't misunderstand. Not 75 words, 75 characters. Roughly speaking, 75 to, in certain cases, 100 and some 30, you can move, but 75 is ideal. Characters, when I say it means, 75 total alphabet. So, of course, like, 4 or 5, let's say, words a headline can be. Then there will be an opening paragraph in your press release. That opening paragraph is actually the lead of your story. Now, lead is what? That opening paragraph, which in journalistic language we call lead, and you are also writing that lead, it should answer 3 W's. Number 1, what? What means the main idea. And when, of course, means the dates, actually. And where of course means the whereabouts or the place, okay? So these 3 questions should be answered in the first paragraph, which we call the lead paragraph. Now please keep in mind, lead is something which is very important, and this is understood that editor, of course, is going to read the first paragraph, and then he's going to decide that is it a newsworthy or not. Okay, now let's move towards the third important point of your press release. So far, I have talked about 2 points. Number 1, headline. Headline is the one which, is very tight in, expressing the whole in few words. Number 2, the lead. Lead is, of course, your opening paragraph. And here you answer 3 W's, what and when and where. And this has to be very, very attractive. It should be attention-seeking, and it should be highly persuasive, so that when your report or press release reaches the hand of editor, he should at once declare that yes, it is newsworthy. So very, very, very carefully prepare your lead. Then onwards, the third paragraph is the sportive details. Now, the remaining W's and H, you're going to answer. You're, of course, going to expand your lead in the third paragraph. The details of that happening, of that incident, or of that event, for example, whatever are the details you're going to write. Of course, keeping this one in mind, that major points should come first and minor second. Why? Because if you keep in your mind the news structure, which is inverted pyramid, that structure actually guides us that the major points at the top, minor in the end, so that it could keep narrowing down itself to the closing. So that actually is the structure. You follow the same one. The last one, of course, is the closing paragraph. There, of course, you wind up your whole story nicely, and that becomes your press release. Now, there are some tips and guidelines I want to discuss with you, which you need to very strictly follow. The first one is this press release. There is one very common error about press release, or people, they actually exploit this press release. How they exploit? They, discuss facts less and promo more. I mean, their press releases are more of promos, actually. They are more of like, publicity and less news. If you are, trying to cheat the editor or the newspaper by, burying promotional or publicity stuff in that press release, the editor, they're not going to give you any space. For example, it will be turned down, trashed to the bin, frankly speaking. So try to stick to the facts and figures, then of course chances are will be of course there. Number 1. Number 2, make sure, because of course press release is written by not reporters, actually by common writers, by common persons. Perhaps sometimes it's written by those who probably never tried any piece of writing. So therefore keep in mind that at minimum, you answer all the 6 questions, WH questions. If they are answered, your story is, of course, complete and full. Number 3, the length of your press release, it should not exceed 800 words. Now, what's the range actually? Range is 300 words to 800 words. You may say even 300 words like, too much. Yes, but do give a margin to the editor that if he feels to, cut down or delete any unnecessary information, for example, he could. So that actually margin, that space actually you're giving by this length. Let's say you write a press release 300 word and you find in newspaper only 50-60 words like printed. So that margin you give. So range is 300 to 800. It should not exceed 800. Of course, the ideal one is always the one which is the middle way. 450, 500 word is the ideal. And when through cut and short, you find some 150 words space you get of your this press release. Number two, as I told you before, headlines, characters 75, 80, and in certain cases depends which newspaper you are sending your news release to, this press release to, could be 130 also, but 75, 80 words is ideal as far as the headline is concerned. Lead paragraph should also not be very long, only 25 words. That's it. So you're going to summarize the whole stuff. You are going to write lead, which is, you can say, the main idea of your whole story in 25 words. Of course, there you need, the précis writing skills actually, which of course we have discussed in our previous classes. So try to, write précis actually in your lead. Next, of course, the universal rule, correct grammar usage. You're going to check your grammar, make sure that you do not, write any incorrect sentences or your expressions is not choppy, for example, that all sentences are simple. Of course, your writing will be tasteless. Then when your writing is tasteless, it means, you are expecting a lot actually, which you should not. Why? Because newspaper people, probably they are the busiest people, Why? Because their fight is only with the time, and that they don't have actually. Therefore, try to shape your press release in such a way that you are offering everything cooked up, so that they get and they print. So no grammatical errors. Next one, of course, I always say about writing, especially journalistic writing, keep your sentences active actually. Don't write passive unnecessarily. Then the word economics, the economy of your expression is important. Don't go for the wordy expressions. Go for one word substitution. Easy, conversational, standable words, of course, will bring a good, feeling, a good taste actually to your, of course, writing. Then, of course, beware of jargon. If you're a technical person, belonging to some technical organization or technical field, for example, chances are that, your press release will be filled with jargons, for example. Keep in mind, you're not writing for your colleagues, actually. You're writing for ordinary people, for example. Therefore, make sure that you do not add jargons in your writing. Next, paragraphing. Keep your paragraphs short, point by point you discuss. So it means there should be, many paragraphs in your press release. And last thing, mixed case. This is very, very common error, though it's a small thing, but it spoils the whole impression. That sometimes what happens, when we receive press release, we find press release written, in all uppercase. The way we write reports for the newscasters, all uppercase. Don't do that. Type or write the way you write or type in your ordinary, and daily matters. So have mixed case, of course, first letter is going to be uppercase and the remaining letters will be, lowercase. So this is all about, the press release. I hope you understand now what is press release and how it is structured and what are do's and don'ts, of this stuff. Let's move now towards our second important journalistic writing, which we call as review writing. Now, this is very important and interesting also. Now, what are reviews actually? Reviews are critical evaluations Critical evaluations of what? Well, critical evaluations of text, critical evaluation of event, for example, critical evaluation of objects or any phenomenon, right? So you as a review writer, what you're doing actually, let's say you have a book in your hand and you are expected to critically assess and evaluate this book and write a review. Please keep in mind, when you are writing a review, you are not summarizing that book. Please keep in mind, review is no summary of the work. It's no summary. Review is critical appreciation of that, critical evaluation. It's an assessment of that. You're going to decide, is it good or bad? How come you can decide by summarizing that text? So, it's commentary. It's not a summary. Please keep this one in your mind. Okay, so this is critical evaluation. Reviews are critical evaluation of texts. Don't forget, not just books actually, we write reviews of texts, we write reviews of events, reviews of objects, reviews of phenomenon. Now, let's go a step ahead of it. You can write, reviews of books. You can write reviews of, let's say, research papers, articles also. You can write reviews of poetry, for example. You can write a review on. You can, go to some fashion shows and you can, attend that fashion show, and then you can write a review which to be printed in tomorrow's newspaper. You can go to some art exhibition and there, you can see and give your comments, very, very critical comments actually. Not always positive. No, that's not the case. So you can go there and you can, appreciate. When we say appreciate, critically appreciate, it does not mean that, we always praise, No, not at all. Critical appreciation means critical assessment and evaluation of that work, in which you decide the fate of that work. Is it good or bad? People are going to like it or they're going to dislike it. Another important thing, 3 points you try to comment on: the knowledge, judgments and organization. What you're going to say, that the work is exemplary or deficient. The whole aim of the review is this very line which I'm telling you, that through your reviews, through this critical evaluation, you decide that so-and-so work is exemplary, which I said good, or deficient means lacking, bad, in its what? Sufficient in what? Deficient in what? In 3 things. Sufficient or deficient in knowledge, sufficient or deficient in judgment, sufficient or deficient in organization. This is what actually reviews are, which you do. And what's the length of these reviews, which we write? Length is not more than 1,000 words. So 1,000 word is a review actually, which is usually printed in the newspaper. Sometimes reviews, of course, cross this limit. They go to 1,500, but depends upon the work actually you are reviewing. Now, what actually review includes in itself? There are 4, again, important points which you are going to focus for your review writing. You can take it also as a structure of your review, but these 4 points should be very much there. Number 1, or you can say paragraph number 1. I, sometimes use the word paragraph so that, you could, practically see in your mind, okay, in first paragraph I'll write this, and second this, third this, so that, things could be, easier for you to understand. Okay, so point number 1 is the content. In every review, point number 1 is always the content. Now, what is content? Content means what you are reviewing. Now, let's say we are reviewing a book. Then what's the name of the book? What's the author's name? Who published this book? And, what's the purpose? What's the genre of the book? And what's the story of the book? What's the theme of the book? And what's the description which is given in the book? That is the content. So the content which you are reviewing, if it's an article, for example, then same way, who has written that article, what this article is about, what's the approach of the author, what he tries to, talk about in this, article, and how it serves the purpose which was set in the beginning of that, article writing. Second thing is the style. Style means, whatever is the theme, whatever are the details, whatever is the argumentation or the story of that book, how it is presented for the readers, that is called style. Is it presented nicely or not nicely? Is it presented through such way, you can say, is it reader focused or not? Does it serve quality readers, or does it serve, the popular readers? Now, popular readers are, of course, a book written for the mass, and quality readers means a book written for, let's say, some technical persons, for example. For example, science books, solid science books, they're not written actually for everybody. They're written for some special class, maybe students of that very, subject. So that actually thing I'm talking about, how that theme is presented in the book for the readers. Now, third important point, rather the most important point, is the assessment. You as reviewer or review writer, now this is your paragraph actually, in which you assess and evaluate that work, in which you give your professional judgment. Sometimes, here, not, of course, I'm not going to blame actually anybody, but sometimes, people, they, commit some professional injustices by not, honestly writing reviews. What they do is actually, at times, this is something really bad, but at times, let's say it's a book, then authors also write themselves a review and send to the reviewer, and that reviewer, then further sends it to the editor and it is printed. And sometimes, in every, of course, book you have preface or the foreword, for example, and then you have some blurbs also and some comments of different publishers, for example, about that book. So what they do is, they do not, go through the details of that book. They only read the preface and they read the blurb and they read the comments of different publishers, and they compile all that stuff, organize, and get it printed. This is, I would say, injustice to this wonderful piece of journalistic writing. So it's simple. It's not that that difficult that you resort to such injustices or I would say professional, in a way, incompetency, when you exhibit or you reflect through your work. So never do it. It's simple. What? Content, summarize that book in one paragraph, style, how information is presented. Number 3 is your assessment, your professional, assessment. And then, again, in this third paragraph, which is your assessment, what you do actually, you answer the same 3 questions. That information which is presented, is it, good, bad? Good means, it's exemplary, or it's deficient in 3 things: knowledge, judgment, and organization. So that actually you critically evaluate and you give your opinion. Do not feel shy at commenting openly, okay? Whatever you feel, just say it, all right? And then comes next point, conclusion. In conclusion, what you do, you decide the fate of this work. Fate means that is it going to be a success or a failure? That you do actually. So this is all about, review thing. Let's move ahead and discuss how we plan actually a review. Well, there are 8-9 points, which we need to write a review. First of all, you need bibliographical data. Now, bibliographical data is what? It's the, of course, name of that work. It's the, publisher's name. Then, the place of publication. and its edition number, for example. If it's in a volume, then volume number, for example. So this is called, bibliographical data. You need, of course, this one. Number 2, classification. You are going to ask yourself, what's the classification of this work? Now, classification means, the genre of that work. Genre mean, is it a drama? Is it a novel? Or it's, let's say, a poetry book? It's fiction, it's non-fiction, it's an article, it's like research report, or, this is some scientific book, or it's a book of psychology, sociology, blah, blah, blah. So this classification, you have to ask yourself, the information you will get about this. Number 3, of course, who is the author and what's his purpose? When you say who is the author, of course you are going to collect information as much about author as possible. You will also, collect information about the philosophy of that author, his, approach also, and what type of writings, he has already produced, and especially what's the purpose of this book. The purpose of this book is, to define things, to claim things, to describe things, narrate things, to argue upon, to influence, people's opinion, you see, or to compare and contrast, all that stuff, like, you have to ask yourself. And then comes, the subject matter. What's the theme of this book? The theme is, of course, the main idea of this book, okay? And then, you will ask yourself or collect information, or you need this information also, that how this theme writer has developed. Look, these all pieces of information you cannot get unless and until, you yourself read the book. You, as a review writer, you are going to read that book. All publishers, all writers, what they do when their book is published, they send you its one copy. They know that, Mr. ABC is a reviewer of so-and-so newspaper, so they're going to send one copy to that reviewer, so that the review could be like, written in that newspaper, could reach the, mass audience. So your job is, this is your, it's a question of your professional ethics, actually, that you go through. When you go through the whole book, of course, you get to know all these things. You will get to know the theme, the development of the theme, and then comes, of course, the style. Ask yourself, while going through the book, how, author presents that information, in that book. He presents through, through complex structures, or he presents through, very easy way. He is reader-oriented, or he is himself-oriented. I mean, he does not bother about his reader, or he bothers a lot about his reader, and he simplifies things, for the understanding. And then comes what? View of life. Now, this is very important. View of life means, author's stance. Is author, like, realistic in his approach, idealistic in approach? Is he practical? Is he impractical? All these questions. This is, you can say, the approach of author towards life, towards that discipline, towards that subject. And then comes the value or the significance. What's the value and the significance of this work? Is this work going to contribute positively towards that very discipline on which this book is written? Or it's just the re-expression, or just the restatement, or re-description, or re-narration of all the research, which has already happened, for example, or it sits on the previous research and then contributes and expands, and like, all that stuff you have to ask yourself. And the last one, of course, the format. The book in itself, the title of the book, the flap of the book, the content page, how pages are designed, the font size, the spacing, the margins, the bibliography, the acknowledgement, the index pages, the footnotes, all that stuff, like, you collect information about. Dear students, in our next class, we'll start from the same point about the reviews, and then, of course, we'll discuss, obituary writing also, and our, final topic, the art of interviews. Then see you again, and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.